This question came up on Quora a lot lately, and I think it's just a great topic. It was one having to do with accountability. We get CEOs who say, well, I can't seem to keep my senior team accountable. They don't seem to ever perform and hit the numbers that they claim they were going to hit at the beginning of the quarter. We get to the end of the quarter and they're nowhere near those particular numbers. Or they haven't completed a project, or who knows what the case might be. So the first place I look is whether or not the CEO is accountable. Because too often founder CEOs set objectives for the rest of the company that they don't set for themselves. They're not very good at meeting deadlines themselves. They're not good at follow-up. They're not good at staying in touch with anybody. They don't do any of the things that show the example that they want everybody else to follow. So I always start there. It starts with the individual running the company. So then moving down into that next layer, when the CEO doesn't have accountability from managers, I tend to unpack that a bit to try and figure out why. I don't believe in doing the reviews of employees where you wait a year and then you do, quote, an annual review where you in essence evaluate the employee's progress. I don't think that review process works all of that well. For one thing, you can't remember most of the stuff that happened in the year, and it's only at the tail end that you start to write your review around that person's behavior. Now, if you happen to be mad at them, chances are you're not going to give them a great review, even if they were great for the first 9 months of the year. And the inverse can also be true, where they were not performing at all and they stepped it up in the last quarter. And you go, oh, that's amazing. They're just great. Well, that isn't always the case, and it isn't how it works. And so I tend to think of the review process as merely a checklist of what was accomplished according to plan. So when I'm sitting down with an employee and I'm saying, okay, let's talk about our review, I'm thinking about where we're going in the next 90 days. So we get together and we work up a plan of what we want to accomplish in those 90 days. And we set some ways to kind of check in once a month, once a week, whatever the case might be for that quarter, to make sure that we're operating according to plan. And then when I get to the end of the quarter, the review is just, did we make it to plan or not? It's just that binary. And then what I look for is whether or not, if we were off plan, why were we off plan? But I hold those people accountable. They had our regular meetings to make sure that things were being met. And so I keep the responsibility on their shoulders to meet their deadlines. Now, if they can't hack it after a couple of quarters, I'm really starting to think whether they're the right person in the role or not. And I have that conversation with them, brutal as that might be. Because what you're looking for is you're looking for that individual who can get through the quarter and meet their deadlines. They should be coming to you if they're falling behind and say, I'm overworked, I don't have the right staff, I don't have the right team, whatever the case might be. Those things should be identified in that plan going forward. You don't want to get to the end of the quarter and meet with all of your team and find out that none of them are to plan. That reflects badly on you. And so what you want to constantly be doing is checking in with your team to make sure that they're going to hit plan. And so there's some things that are very hard to predict, such as customer behavior, customer response to some of the things that you're doing. There's plenty of unknowns. And you have to bake that into the plan going forward. You have to say, look, we're not going to know these things. This would be a best case, worst case scenario. And you should be somewhere in between those two scenarios. And so I don't cut them any slack if they just continue to not perform. I've had sales teams in the past that continually overstate what they're going to hit and never, ever hit those numbers. So after a while, I just start to doubt all of the numbers and I start to cut them way, way back because I say, look, you have a history of never hitting your numbers at all. So why should I be the least bit confident that you can actually do that? And so you want to be able to have that really blunt conversation, and you have to hold people accountable. Sometimes you have to fire them, and I've made this before. I really hate to fire people, especially if they're trying everything they can to hit their numbers. But sometimes you have to, and it sends a message to everybody else that you're pretty darn serious about staying on track with the company objectives. It's very critical that you be that clear about it, and you be that clear about your plan going forward in the next 90 days, and break it down if you have to. Sometimes you're off plan because you're too abstract and you haven't broken down enough details in the plan so that you can see whether or not the goals and objectives are realistic or not. So make sure that those goals and objectives match the plan and that all of the stuff kind of puts together. And then you should be just fine. After about 1 or 2 quarters, you should be on track and your team should be firing on all cylinders. That's if you're performing correctly too and you're taking this process seriously. That's how I think about the quarterly review, and that's how I think about accountability in an organization. Tend to be a little bit black and white about those things, and I want to keep a great team, that's for sure. But you have to hit the objectives. It's just really, that's the way it has to come down. Otherwise, you're not going to have a company. It's going to go away. Then what are you going to do? It's not fair to the other employees. Think about it for that reason too, because some people can say, well, you can't be that harsh on somebody and you can't fire them. Well, as a CEO, you have to think about everybody in the organization, and you have to think about the performance of the company related to shareholders and investors who are putting in their money. You have to think about the fellow employees and meeting payroll and all of the things that you have to do. So it's a massive responsibility. You need to take it seriously, and you need to have your senior team take it seriously as well. And they should be practicing these same methods all the way through. Also, this is another little caveat, a little side thing, is that you want to have a great relationship with your team so that they deliver bad news to you early. So, the one thing I've noticed is that sometimes if somebody has to deliver bad news to me, they'll delay it. They'll put it off. They don't want to tell me. And the reason is that, bad news always has a tendency to come late. No one wants to deliver it. Good news tends to come early. And so, you have to take that into account. But you want to have a great enough relationship with your people that if things aren't going well and you're off plan and you know it early enough, they say, hey, we're off plan. We don't know why. Let's unpack that. And then you can get involved in helping solve that problem. But when they wait till the end of the quarter to tell you, that's not good at all. 2 things. One, either you're a really crappy CEO and they don't want to come to you with anything because of how you behave, which means you have to change your behavior, or you have the wrong team. It's one of those 2 things. So with that, thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon. Bye. Thanks for watching this episode. If you want to follow us and know where we are, you can find us in a bunch of places. We're on middlerock.com, which is our website. Up at the top, you'll see things for upcoming Zoom events that you can participate in. We bring in other speakers and we talk about entrepreneurship. You can also find me on Tom on Entrepreneurship on Quora, as well as Tom Nault on Quora. I also have a personal website, tomnault.com. You can find there, but I don't talk about business as much. So you can find us in all of those different places. And so we hope to hear from you. Write us, let us know what you think. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to hit the bell when the next one is coming up so that you're notified. And thank you very much for being here.